Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. I'm Dennis, the host of this meetup. Really happy to have today Deirdre Breakenridge. Deirdre is going to talk to us about a new model for media training. Deirdre is the CEO of Pure Performance. And I think Deirdre mentioned to us, she's going to premiere a new model today at this meetup. So I'm very excited. Deirdre, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I'm so happy to be with all of you. And let me share my presentation. Okay. So yes, I've launched this Feel model, and this is the first time that I'm talking about it in the media training realm. So probably many of you have either gone through media training, or you're on a team that does media training, or perhaps you know of media training. Everything that you've learned, this is taking it to the next step, adding what I call a feel lens. Because now is a time when you look at conversations that are going on in the media and with their respected communities and audiences, there's a lot of frustration and anger and polarized opinions, and it's a tougher landscape. So if you just show up with your talking points and what you want to say and your executive presence, it's not enough. You have to apply a feel lens. So let me break it down for you, this word feel, and I'm going to go into the feel model, what the acronym FEEL stands for, but I just want you to think for a moment about the word feel, because you're in business, and how much do we think about feel as leaders in our organizations, and is it minimized? Do we put feel first, or is it just this teeny tiny word that kind of gets tacked on as a let's check the box, let's be empathetic, let's be emotionally intelligent, but it doesn't play out in our interactions, let alone our media interviews. Now, even on social media. So I went to business school, I got my MBA, and there was no class in feel, clearly. And, sure, we do talk a lot, as I said, about EI. But even when you do a search, and thanks to my friends at Talkwalker, this is a Boolean search that looked at the characteristics of leaders on social media and what was being said about them in a positive way. And the words that, these are millions of conversations, the words that stand out are visionary and innovation and technology, and leaders need to be global and they have to understand finance and data. And words like human and relationships and emotional intelligence, and you'd be hard pressed to find the word feel in this particular word cloud. So I want you to remember that, because think about relationships, and think about relationships specifically when you're trying to build a relationship with the media and to get them to trust you, your journalist, your podcaster, your show host, and to have their audiences trust you. It starts with your strategic communication. It starts with the normal ways that you think about the timing of your stories, the pitches, how much you research the outlet, the creative content. That's all your strategy and the norm. However, it's the difference between getting called to the show once and being the go-to expert, where when you apply a feel lens, right? Because in any relationship, let's face it, if you don't feel, how do you build trust, and how do you actually have a relationship? So this is what I want you to sort of keep top of mind as we go through media training with a feel lens. Where does all of this start? Okay, I always say a 24-year-old millennial put me on the road to feel. And this is my stepdaughter, Noelle. This is a much longer story, and I'm going to keep it very brief and short. Noelle was an extremely energetic, passionate, enthusiastic, vocal 24-year-old millennial. And sadly, tragically, and unexpectedly, she left us. And as a part of my moving forward and grieving process, and moving forward with purpose, I had so many questions that I needed to ask millennials. Noelle was a millennial, and I knew only millennials could answer my questions. So I thought to myself, let me start talking to millennials, and I want to know, how do you show up to your conversations? Are you being authentic? How do you want to be perceived? What do you value? But most of all, what do you want from the people around you, the people you look up to, your mentors, your supervisors, your bosses, business leaders, executives from your favorite brands? How do you want them to come across to you through any touch point, including media interviews? And what builds trust and a relationship? So what ended up happening was 25 interviews turned into 50. 50 interviews turned into 75. 75 turned into 100 interviews for a year plus, that I started to write down and record all of their answers, all of this incredible qualitative data. And do you know what they were asking for? Do you know what they were screaming for? The word feel came through loud and clear, because their answers were grouped into buckets. And the buckets were: leaders, please face your fears. Put your egos aside in your interviews. Get out of your comfort zone. Be more open and embrace diverse perspective. And leaders, could you please be a little more empathetic? Could you really listen and understand and be caring and show kindness? And leaders, please, in your interviews, can you live with ethics and show your values and good judgment? And leaders, the L in feel is love. Can you show the love, and can you match our passion and take a stance? So this turned into the feel model. Now, the feel model is not just for media training, but we're going to apply it to media training and a roadmap with exercises today. And where it starts with any part of the model is with this understanding of passion potential and moving beyond traditional media training that just says you show up with your passion. Nope, your passion has to be met, and you have to get a handle on how you feel first, which is a test that I'm going to explain, so that you can get a handle on other people's emotions as you are out there in your media interviews, and you're watching the backlash or the excitement around what you're saying as it plays out in real time, or even if it's on social media or if it's within your organization. And as you apply this model to all your different touch points, you very quickly build a deeper, stronger relationship. So let me go into it a little bit more. And I bring this to you with two hats on, okay? Because for 30 years, and 20 out of the 30 years, I've been a media trainer and I am a PR strategist. But the other hat that I wear is with my media lens, because I've been a blogger since 2008, and I'm pitched constantly by public relations professionals and agencies and executives who have stories. I had a NASDAQ show that was broadcast out of Market Site in Times Square, where I was pitched. And I also now, I'm a podcaster. It's the 5th year of my show, Women Worldwide, and that's an audio and a video show. So this is the hats that I wear as I share this information for your media training with a feel lens. What is this notion of passion potential? So in regular media training, you definitely do your due diligence and you break down your talking points, you get your messages and you put stories around them and stats, and you make sure everybody can understand them. And you do a lot of body language and training, and you bring your passion forward. But that's only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is getting a real handle on the emotions and what people really care about. And they're so vocal today. And social media lets us know this as media and interviews play out. At the point of intersection where what you care about so deeply and what your expertise and your thought leadership, what you can bring to the table, and what people really, really need, want, and care about, that's the point of passion potential where feel begins. So this is an exercise, and this is a part of the training where, how would you do this? How would you know what I'm saying or my own content or my talking points actually meets what the media says about me or what their audiences say and what they perceive. This is all text analysis, and that's where it starts. And I'm going to run you through an example, which is an example of me, where I take content that is my owned content and I analyze that, and I have a word cloud, and I make the comparison to how the media reports on me and about me and my messaging and what people say about me. So let's start there. This little word cloud right here is an analysis of my website, because on deirdrebreckenridge.com, it's all the things that I want to share and that I'm super passionate about. And that's what you would expect. So when you crunch all of the words, and I use a tool that I can drop my URL into this tool and it will generate this word cloud. Clearly, what stands out is I am all about community and feel and emotional intelligence and PR and media and strategy and marketing. That's who I am. This is what I share. However, how do you find the passion potential? Well, I analyzed 6 months of all the stories and the things that the media has said about me, that they've picked up from my speaking engagements or where I've interviewed, or perhaps the podcasts that were transcribed, to see the match. The words that are underlined are the matches. That's the passion potential, knowing that certain outlets and audiences definitely connect with me because of these words. But you have to take it a step farther to say, what else is there? And in this training, you find the PP, or passion potential, feel, PR, media, community. Those were some of the words that matched. But then you also say, you know what? I'm talking about topics that I didn't see picked up by the media. Why is that? Am I not communicating that the right way? Is there something different that I have to do so they pick up on it? Those are the topics that I mention more that they don't pick up on, that are smaller in their word cloud. And then I look at the topics that they have in the word cloud, that the media reports about me, that aren't even in my word cloud or are really small. And that says, I need to lend my voice. So what I found out just recently about myself, and it's a good thing because I'm writing a book on ethics. So they want me to talk about ethics. They want me to talk about truth in media. They want to hear more about empathy in the FEEL model, millennials and all the data that I have from the test, and politics. Who knew? Now it's my job and every executive's job who goes through this exercise to go back to adjust the talking points and to make sure that the talking points and the bios and the content and the presentations all reflect that ability to be able to lend your voice in important areas where the passion and the potential meets and you can grow the relationship. Okay, so I mentioned this test. Once you find the passion potential and all these opportunities, you step back and you say, well, I feel like I do feel, or how do I know that I face my fears, I engage with empathy, I live with ethics and values, and I really do. I show the love of my mission as an executive. There's a test that you can take. It's the feelfirsttest.com. I encourage all of you to take the test. It's a 32 question test that breaks down every single part of the model. And even though it's not exclusive to media training, it sets you up to be more open and mindful and to be able to listen and to engage and to be able to sort of see somebody else's perspective and to have more empathy. What it's really doing is it's asking you and scoring you on, are you present? Are you mindful? Do you check your ego at the door? Because that's really important today. If you don't check your ego at the door, you shut down a conversation immediately. Can you step out of your comfort zone in an interview so that you can share beyond what you want to say around a fringe topic or something that's important to an audience? Are you an active listener? And can you actually on cue tell how somebody else is feeling to reposition and to make a conversation more comfortable? Can you recognize not just your own body language, but somebody else's? And what is that telling you? It's all about energy and passion. And you're scored. The beauty of it is that you're scored in every single bucket of the test. And then the test gives you exercises to increase your ability to face your fears, to be able to engage with more empathy, to use ethics and good judgment and what you might have to do to not just say you have values and good ethics, but to show it and to really unleash your love. This is the beginning of a roadmap that gets applied to your media training and how you show up to your media interviews, whether it's a phone interview, a Skype interview, maybe someday we'll be back in the studios, wherever that is. This is the start of that roadmap. So now I want to take it a little bit further, because you could take the test and you could find 4 different exercises and say, okay, that's my roadmap. I'm going to do these exercises and it's really going to help me in all of my interactions. But I made this roadmap much more specific to executives and teams who train executives so that you can really up your game, be so on point, and take any kind of interview, from the softball, happy, easygoing, to the hardball, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this question? But I've got this type of interview. So here we go. Okay. In the department of Face Your Fears, there are no excuses for these exercises. It is time for every single executive who thinks that they want to do an interview to be clear, get present, and be mindful. This is so important. And what I find is a lot of executives say to me, oh my gosh, I do a power pose stretch before I take the interview, and I breathe deeply 10 times before I go in. No. What I recommend is a daily regimen, because the more you practice being mindful and getting present and having this clarity, you're going to trust your gut, your hunches, you're going to be much more open and be able to identify what's actually going on with the media person and what they're transmitting to you, or how to handle any audience that's reacting to what you're saying. So how do you do it? Well, like my dog Lily on my yoga mat, maybe it is some yoga every day. Maybe it's walking more. Maybe you like to run. Maybe it's daily meditation that starts with 5-minute sessions once, twice, 3 times a day. Maybe it's cutting back on your technology. All of these things help you to clear your mind, because when you clear your mind, you can be a lot more open to what's going on, and you'll be much, much more perceptive. And that's what you need in your interviews today. Now, another area in the face fears and an exercise to do as a part of your media training with a feel lens is your openness, your ability to not shut down the conversation because you have your ego hat on and a big chip on your shoulder, but instead it's your ability to go into the interview knowing that there are certain questions you're going to love to answer, but bridging out to topics that are in the news that are very, very hard to answer. Because today in any interview, you just never know what that question is going to be. And if you are in an industry that is related to anything that's going on, you will be asked. And it's so important that you're able to step out of your comfort zone in such a way that you can have a comfortable conversation and that it's not a knee-jerk reaction. So this exercise is about a brainstorm. And the brainstorm is to not only brainstorm about what you want to talk about and all the great things that you want to say, but the brainstorm is to identify all the questions that you don't want to be asked, and to have answers, and to have a comfortable way to move and bridge and go back to the area that you need to share about without somebody else feeling like you shut them down, or you didn't validate what they were saying. So that is the exercise. Now we're on to the E, the first E in feel, which is empathy. And with empathy is understanding. And I know that the preparation in media training is a lot around your agenda. There's certain things when you're working for a company, we know that you want to share and that you want to say, and you come from a place of a perspective and a bias. But let's think about agenda both ways, okay? An agenda is an acronym. And here's how you have to look at it. You have an agenda, they have an agenda, and how much are you going to have understanding and care enough to meet in the middle so that a relationship could grow? A relationship with your media person and a relationship with the people and the community that they serve. So you have to know that the A is attitude. What's your attitude? Are you willing to put the ego aside? What's their attitude, and do you think that they will? Will you be shifting your attitude slightly to meet them where they are, or try to meet in the middle? This is an understanding. Next is general bias. That's the G. You have a bias from all of the different perspective and all of your experience. And so does the media, and so do the people that they serve. And with this bias, immediately you have an opportunity to ask why, to question, to find out more information before bunking heads and shutting down. And that's really hard to do. But the exercise comes from listening. And the exercise comes from the ability to not just prove a point, but to let somebody else speak. And this is really hard to do, but that's media training with a feel lens. The E in agenda is education. And a lot of us have deep knowledge and deep education, but sometimes one of the problems is that when we don't realize the education level of our media person or the people who are watching or listening or reading, we're talking over people's heads. And that doesn't make for a second callback. That doesn't make the go-to expert. That kind of cuts the relationship because there's such a disconnect on the way that you're speaking. Next is, after E, is the N for narrative. You have a narrative and they have a narrative. Pay very, very close attention to what that narrative is, what's being talked about widely, and what's specific in a news circle, because you can bet your questions will come from there. The D is data. There's data all around us. What I recommend is, when this is your new playbook, this exercise is building a playbook. When you're looking at data, be looking at the sentiment of the data, because that's where the feelings are. And that's really important, because feelings flare, and they flare in interviews and also in what happens after interviews. And lastly is, what effect does the topic have on the public? It has an effect certainly on you and the people you serve, but what about on them? When you can look at the agenda this way, you suddenly come across differently. You come across as the expert who is knowledgeable, the expert who knows their stuff, but the expert who is human and understanding and can be able to have a conversation, can listen. You don't always have to agree on everything, but you're not shutting the conversation down. And when it comes to empathy, it's also really important to understand in your own interviews, what level of empathy do you operate on or not? This is an exercise in looking at your past interviews to say, was I being cognitive? Was I being emotional? Or was I actually being compassionate? I can give you an example. You go into an interview and you are answering a question. And when you're answering, you notice that your interviewer changes tone, shifts body language, expression changes. You see it happen all the time on cable news shows. But because you are cognitive and you have cognitive empathy, you can then shift. You shift your tone, you shift your expression, and you move the conversation to something that is more comfortable. That is cognitive empathy, because you can just recognize that something is going on with somebody else. Now, The next level of empathy is emotional. That's when you start to have a little bit of trust in the conversation with your media person or the people who are watching and listening, because what you're doing is, as somebody is talking to you, you're mirroring back some of their language, not necessarily to say, I agree with your point, because you don't have to agree. But mirroring is a technique that's used in hostage negotiations with terrorists. And I learned this from Chris Voss because he was on my show and he was a former FBI agent. And if it works for hostage negotiation, it works for relationships and showing that you have emotional empathy. And that then takes you to the next level, because if that interviewer and if those people, if there is a recognition that you have empathy, they're going to dig deeper and they're going to ask you, how might you solve this? What might you do? What are some things that people can do to, what would you do to help them? When you get to that level, that's compassionate. Compassionate empathy is the point where they trust you enough that they want to hear what you, as the expert, recommend. So now, here's the exercise. Go back to your last 3 interviews, and if they were on video, if it was a Skype interview, or maybe you have some old interviews in a studio, or you're on TV, some clips, go back and say, did I answer those questions from a place of empathy? Was I cognitive? Was I emotional? Or was I compassionate? And that's a really interesting exercise. You learn a lot about yourself and how you come across. Okay, ethics. That's one of my favorites. So ethics in the media go hand in hand. And when you bring your ethics and your values forward, it builds trust. And you might be saying, well, we're not seeing a lot of values, or maybe where are the ethics in media today? Exactly. Don't fall into the trap. You bring your ethics and value forward. And the first exercise starts with something really simple, but I think we forget about this sometimes as executives. What are our values? So, ethics, it's a personal choice and it's a business practice. So if I were to ask you in 30 seconds or less right now to write out your values or to talk them, right, to share them right now with me or with this group, would you be able to do that? That's your homework. 30 seconds or less, just write it out. Make sure you feel it, make sure you know it, because the next step is to say, do my values align with that of the business, the company that I go out and I speak about and that I show up for the interviews, and hopefully there is an alignment, because if there's not an alignment, that's an issue. And the biggest part of feel, you have to have that alignment, because you want to go beyond words. You want to practice the values so the ethics play out in all of your interactions. So how do you know? How do you test this? How do you spot it? Sometimes you can spot it in somebody else's interview. So for example, famous example, Tony Hayward, CEO, the big BP Gulf oil spill. He's on an interview with the Today Show, right? And what does he say? More than anything, I want my life back. Okay, well, the BP core values, respect and care. What part of me and my matched those values and played out in that interview? So if you can recognize that, or you can see that in other people's interviews, that is one way to test your ability to see how ethics kind of move forward in media. But also I encourage you, if you have interviewed or you're working with executives that have interviewed, go watch those interviews or read how a journalist portrayed quotes and what was stated. And then ask yourself, did values play out through the interviews? Pick 3 of them and do this exercise. It's very, very helpful. And then the last part of media training with a feel lens on this exercise roadmap is all about the love portion. And, regular media training is about your body language and making sure that you're sitting the right way and you're sitting forward. And there's a lot that you work on with yourself, and that doesn't stop. But as you're identifying your love and how much passion you put forward in your interviews, and this is through, yes, it is your body language, but it's also through your words, it's through your tone of voice, how you express yourself. Your goal is always to be an 8 to a 10 on the energy light bulb scale. You don't want to be a 5. So you're always going to be watching your interviews, or even if they're written, to see how you're coming across in terms of your energy and your love for your mission. Because if you're a 5, why would anybody want to ask you more about what you're doing? Why would they care? Why would that person who's interviewing you have additional questions and get excited, right? So you are evaluating your own turn up the energy ability, but you also have to take it a step further. And this is where it gets interesting, because it's when you're training, it's not just about you anymore. Because of the climate we're in, it's reading other people and it's reading the room. What's happening with the person who's interviewing you? You should be able to, if they come in at a 5 energy, you should be able to bring up their energy with your energy. This happens naturally between audiences. Like when a speaker goes out on stage with excitement and enthusiasm and presence, naturally the energy of the audience, you lift one another up. It's no different in an interview, but you have to recognize what's going on with that person. How are they sitting? Are they leaning forward? Are they smiling? Are they into the interview? Are they rolling their eyes, waiting for it to be over and for you to like get done with the answer to a question? This is when you read their energy and you raise somebody up, your love goes up, their love goes up, and guess what? That relationship, that sticks. When you have that kind of energy together, you will suddenly become the go-to expert. They will come back to you time and time again. And not only that, it's because the energy that you're transmitting between the two of you is also being transmitted out to an audience that's reading something that's brilliant, they're watching something that has them so engaged because of the energy level. So these are all different ways on the roadmap where feel is applied. So you don't want to stop your regular media training. So I do media training. You just want to add a feel lens to it so you can take your relationships to a deeper level. And I know I said that feel started with millennials, but if you think about it, this is not just about millennials. Feel is so human. It's the most human thing that we can do. It's every single generation. And that's why it's so important as business leaders or people who are working with leaders that this feel has to come through, and it has to be real, because that's the only way that you're going to get to a trusted relationship. So I ask you now, after everything you've heard, and I know I've shared a lot, will you start to apply feel and put a feel lens to get to those trusted relationships? And with that, here's all my contact information. I'm always happy to talk about media training or feel in any realm, because it really is the backbone that when you take strategy and you add feel to it, you're going to go deeper with anybody that you want to build a relationship with. So thank you, and I'm ready to take your questions.
Thanks so much, Deirdre. So for folks out there, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or use the chat area. I'll start with a question, Deirdre, which is the current situation we're in. We're probably on a lot of these Zoom meetings when we're interacting with the media.
Yes.
Does your model, have you thought of any adjustments to make, given that for the foreseeable future, we'll probably not be in the same room with the interviewer?
Yeah, so my training actually incorporates that. And, even before COVID, I was letting executives know that there's a lot that goes into the way you show up to your Skype interviews, I was doing, because I do a lot of interviews on Zoom for my podcast, watching executives and seeing that their backgrounds weren't right or they weren't positioning themselves correctly. So yeah, that is a big part of it because it is very different. You can feed off energy very easily when you're together with somebody, but it is harder when you're on Zoom. And I do think you see it now. There are a lot of talking head interviews. So that is something that I am honing in on and stressing, and we're practicing a lot.
Got it. Makes sense. And I noticed your closing slide was about applying this methodology, the framework, to just your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
What I was thinking it would apply really well to job interviews. Is there any adjustment you would make when interviewing for a job, or is it just use the whole framework as is?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you said that because some of the millennials talked about job interviews, and I didn't pull that out as much, but it certainly does apply because, you want to show up with your best self. And any interview, whether it's a media interview or it's a job interview, you have to go in there. You're certainly facing your fears. You want to make sure you're listening closely and being understanding of what the person is asking of you and what that role is going to be. And if you took this, so what I did with this model, and I haven't built the presentation yet because social media will be the next presentation that I'm giving, but taking this into the organization, whether in HR, so as a part of training and better conversations with managers and teams, but I also think that there is an application for this that companies can use the test to see if candidates feel and if it's a fit in that respect. So I did think about it kind of in the opposite way, Dennis, which is interesting.
That would be interesting for candidates to get their feel score and see what happens.
Yeah, I do actually have organizations that have reached out to say, how can we license this test so that we sort of have a better understanding of how our own employees feel and what kind of exercises they would need to do. And then they'd be able to have their own data and pull from it, which is kind of cool.
There's a nice comment in here from Esther. Esther is based in Italy and runs her own tech startup. About your framework, she says, I think this is the essence of being entrepreneurs. You create business to reflect your roots inside when you're an employee. You are living someone else's whys.
Well, thank you for that comment. Yeah, you want to live your true self always. And in order to do that, you have to feel. And sometimes I think, and it happens. It happens to everybody. We all get wrapped up in what's going on in our companies, in our world. There's so much technology, and it distracts us from the real and the genuine and getting a handle on how we feel and how we show up to better tap into the people that we want to build relationships with. So it unfortunately took a very sad story to make me stop and to get away from the hectic and the noise and to find that clarity and to find answers and to bring this forward and to hopefully have everybody take a good look at their true selves.
Well said. All right, last call for any comments or questions. I'll wait a few seconds. All right, well, Deirdre, thank you so much for this excellent framework. It's a lot to think about. And oh, wait, let's see. We got a chat come in. Thank you for sharing your framework from Andrea. And for everyone who attended, thank you for attending. I'll have the recording available later today.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so
Thanks,
much.
Deirdre.
I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care.